Hey there, bibliophiles! Today we're breaking it down with Ellis Hart, author of The House That Held Her, a twisty, clue filled mystery and thriller told by Margot's perspective as she's drawn back into a house filled with buried secrets, cryptic riddles, and a past that haunts. As she tries to understand the clues left behind, Margot and you are forced to question what's real, who to trust, and what is the truth. But hey, Ellis, thank you so much for joining the podcast. How are you?
Hi, I'm really good. That was incredible. I feel like next time I need you to write all of my blurbs because that was great.
Of course. But really, I know we connected through mutual friend Susie, which in her book, and she was like, "You have to read The House That Held Her," and I was like, "Yeah, of course." I hadn't heard of it. I hadn't read any of your other works, but it was a really captivating thriller. And typically, I guess the endings, and I didn't.
Mhm.
And it was just well done from first to last page.
Thank you. It's so weird because it was like my first thing that I ever released. Um, and I try not to be like super hyper responsive about reviews and stuff, but it's hard not to be. Um, but still, like having lots of folks be like, "I can't believe this is a debut," is just wild to me. It makes me feel kind of out of body. Like I don't know if I actually really wrote that. Was that me? Because that's just like it feels. It like came out of me so quickly, and then trying to write another book has been way more challenging. Maybe because there are expectations. I don't know, but. But yeah, it's thank you so much. I loved that it was my first book because I love the characters so much.
Well, and so to kind of get a background of who you are, have you been a reader? Has reading been something that's always part of your life, or have you been more writer focused?
Yeah, no, I am a massive reader. What's unique about, and I don't know if it's necessarily unique to me. I actually think it's probably unique to our generation. Um, but I kind of fell away from reading like in my young adulthood. Um, I read so much as a kid, and then it just kind of fell away. Life happens, things get busy. Prioritize like when Netflix comes out with a show. Um, but interestingly enough, when my wife and I were moving our family from Maryland to Florida, we packed up all of our TVs, and then our closing got delayed. And I was like, I am not bringing all the TVs back out. What are we gonna do for entertainment? And so I was like, I guess we could read. And it's so crazy because that then had all these other subsequent events that got me to writing this book. And so I kind of rediscovered my passion and my love for reading at the same exact time my wife did. And then, I mean, when we moved into this house, I literally built a library. So we have massive bookshelves with so many books, and I think we're just constantly reading all the time.
So, for writing The House That Held Her, was it just you had a passion for reading that was reignited and you were like, I think I could do one of these? Like how did that convert from becoming a reader again to actually writing?
Yeah, I definitely wrote a ton as a kid. You know, like I was into like Magic Tree House and stuff like that, and so just like the kind of general fun fantasy things for kids, I always did. I used to like taking the 8 by 11 pages and then like folding them and stapling them and having like a book. But you grow up and that thing kind of stops. But what always was in the back of my head was there were not a lot of books that I could find, and I'm sure they exist, but there were not a lot of books that I could find that had all of the things that I wanted. And so, like, I'm a huge escape room person. Loved National Treasure and growing up on all that Indiana Jones type of stuff. And I was like, man, why are there no, like, clue based thrillers that are out there? And so I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just do it myself. And so that was kind of my rule with this book was I'm only going to write it if I would be happy to read it myself, you know? But yeah, it was almost like a stroke of luck, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I think that's not found very often, and I enjoyed it because With mysteries, you're usually solving something in the past. With thrillers, you're trying to solve something in the present. And this is one of those unique books that does both, where you're trying to understand what happened in the past while Margot is trying to understand her present and what her future looks like because of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting with the. I always have to try and like not spoil things while also talking about it, which is a challenge. But like the Lila kind of like subplot and the past and trying to figure out like everything that went on and everything that it then impacted in Margot's present and future. It's like those timelines are really can honestly be very daunting and very exhausting when like you're going through and you're like we have 11 John Mars. I love John Mars, but he is infamous for this, right? And you're like there are 11 characters, 9 timelines, there's 9 pages left, and he always figures out how to do it. But it was so challenging to try and figure out like how do I make people not give up instantly because I just gave them a different thing. And the way that I kind of crafted it was not necessarily giving Lila her own sections of the book, which was my original kind of thought, seeing it through her eyes. But Margot's memories and her interpretation of the scenario. So it was a little bit of like a tooling mechanism, but I think it worked out for the most part.
No, I agree. And I think with John Mars too, he's one of those like you think you have it figured out, especially Keep It in the Family. It's
Yes.
like he has 6 plot twists in that
Hmm.
entire book. And I think, the house that held her too, like you get this false sense of security, like, I figured it out. And then it's like,
Yes.
oh, not quite.
Yeah, it's so funny because, there is like, I 1000% had originally written the book with the kind of 3/4 twist that most people are like, oh, I saw that coming. That was like my twist. And I kind of sat down and I was like, this is not enough. So what can I do that I actually make this even more obvious so that people are like, wow, this book isn't very good. I called the twist when it's a false kind of sense of security. Like you said, you think you got the twist and then there's then you turn the page and you're like, what the, and then you have to go back and you're like, how.
Yes, yes, those last chapters just, yeah, I was like, from that point on, I was like, well, I'm not putting this book down because I need to know.
I definitely like people say that all the time. They're like, it was a 3 and then there were 9 chapters left and then it went up from there just because of the closing chapters. And I think that's important. You have to close strong. I think one of the things that we see a lot in thrillers right now is just like how outrageous and preposterous and terrifying can we make our like prologue and then start 10 years later in a super boring scenario and build up to that prologue and you're like I know it's here somewhere. And in the house that held her it's a really eerie prologue, but like it's not this high intensity are they gonna jump off the cliff or not. It's just this kind of slow pulsing like something is going on. um, yeah, I could talk all day. I don't even remember where I was.
Well, I did have a fun question because your dedication, obviously to your family, so sweet. But I had to ask about the trampoline. Please tell me you're still jumping on the trampoline.
Yes. What's so funny is that I mean it's not funny at all, but I have never felt like older in my life. And what's interesting is I just lost over the past like 3 years. I've really focused on like health and fitness, and I lost a ton of weight, and then have been strength training and trying to be like the best kind of version of myself for my kids. And my I don't know if you know this, but I used to be in a touring rock band, and so I used to run around on stage all the time, and I 1000% tore my M and ACL in my left leg, and I never took care of it the right way, and so even now jumping is like so painful. So I have to be very very like strategic with when I go jump on the trampoline, because it definitely does not feel very good. But my children do love it. I think we've bought two trampolines since we've moved here because the Florida sun is just bakes everything, you know? But yes, so I do try to jump on the trampoline, but moving here to Florida, we also have an awesome pool, and so I feel like I swim with them, which is a lot nicer on the body. And tossing them in and that kind of thing is the same vibes, you know?
And so, speaking of Florida, I've lived in Florida for over 15 years. And a lot of the beginning of The House That Held Her is setting up not just the eeriness of what's going on, but just the actual setting. And I've seen some reviewers that are like, the setting's a little like too much, like we get it, it's humid, but like as a Floridian, let me tell you, that was so refreshing to see. Like, no, he gets it. Florida, it's not just like the sunshine and it is wet. Like, you walk
Yeah,
outside and you are wet. So
it's so true.
I adored that. And it
Thank
just
you.
was very genuine and authentic. But I had to ask, why Mount Dora?
So I'm gonna keep probably saying, "Oh, this is so funny," but this one actually is, I think, where we had moved to our new house in Florida, and the week we landed, uh, there was supposed to be a hurricane, and I was like, "Shit!" Our first week, we're gonna get a hurricane. Our house is gonna blow away, and we're gonna lose power and all
Yes.
this kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
And so the book starts with a hurricane because
Yes.
I was experiencing a hurricane, right? And I was like, what a fun setting. But, um, and so I thought to myself, okay, in case the power goes out, I want to start writing this book, right? And I could write it out paper and pencil. So let me try and find a town that kind of like meets my requirements. So I literally go to Google and I'm like, a town that has like old, like colonial historical vibes. It has a big lake. It has like lots of elevation and trees and all kinds of stuff. And Google's basically like, here are your things. Mount Dora's probably the best. So I go on Google Street View and I'm like walking through Mount Dora using the Google Street View. And I wrote the whole book that way. And then right before the book came out, my wife was like, "You should go." And so I went and realized I'd gotten a bunch of stuff wrong, and luckily had enough time to go back and fix a bunch of the things that I'd gotten in incorrectly. And it really turned out really charming in my opinion because there are things like the Mount Dora Historical Museum, for example, right, is real and it exists. And I envisioned it before I even like saw pictures of it, and I envisioned it exactly the same. But when I went in, um, the lady who was working there was so much more like unique and lovely than the character that I'd originally written. And so I was like, "Can I just write you into the book?" And she was like, "Yeah, sure." And now they sell it at the historical museum.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, yeah. So it was really fun to kind of go through and try and find a town that kind of met the requirements. But then it's like a second, wave of fun because it's just a beautiful place and I love it very much. And so we've gone a bunch since then. So it's near and dear to me now.
I bet. And another thing that I was like, yes, this is a Florida town is the gator because like even where I work, there's a pond out back, and we just had an email sent out like, there's an alligator spotted. Like, be careful when you're walking to your cars. Like, if you have even a retention pond somewhere, there's a 98% chance of there being a gator. So for
Oh yeah.
anyone
Oh
that
yeah.
read it and was like, that's so unrealistic, you are wrong.
Yes. No, 1000%. I mean, we came and we went to Gatorland, of course. For those
Of
who are
course.
watching who don't know Gatorland, it's like a reservation for all of the gators in Florida where people call and instead of like, killing them or something, they take them all in. And they have thousands of gators. And it is so interesting because I learned the extreme differences between alligators and crocodiles and how gross crocodiles are and how aggressive and mean, and then actually how docile and like kind of great alligators are. And one of the things that I'd learned was like they're not going to mess with you unless you're by their nest. If you're going
Right.
to make their eggs in danger, and so that was kind of the thought of like, oh well, I have to put some kind of nest or something around, and it will chase her, and like how terrifying and how Florida would that be?
Very Florida. All the check
Yes.
marks.
We have a huge lake behind our house, and we see them every morning. I mean, and my wife
Yeah.
will just Snapchat like, "Hello, puppy," and they're always out there.
Yeah, they always have like advisories and stuff in my neighborhood of like for small dogs, like be on the lookout while you're walking your dog. Like you don't know like if there's a nest around, you don't know if the alligator. It's just always best to be cautious.
Yes. Yep. I completely agree.
So, obviously Margot and Nate, that is a staple relationship that's examined and I know a lot of people talk about that, but when I was reading, it was actually Margot and Shannon's friendship
Hell yeah.
that stuck out to me. I mean, that is a
Hmm.
ride or die bestie right there. So I was kind of wondering if you
Dude.
could walk us through the inspiration behind that dynamic.
Um. So I feel like as I was working through the manuscript, and it was like just this constant onslaught of heaviness. And Walter's a little bit of a charming character to give some relief. But it was just you can't trust the cops, you can't trust the neighbors, you can't trust the town, like and you need that relief, and Nate is gone, right? And so I was like, dude, we got to have like a bestie here, and my kind of like knee jerk reaction is kind of to base it off of my best friend from back home, Sean. Our moms were best friends, and we were born almost at the same time, and so we were just kind of built-in best friends, right? Um, and he has Shannon's personality, and so I really tried to like kind of build her around him, and he will just like, he'll be in a funeral, and then he'll come out with some little quip, and it just like, how are you making me laugh at a funeral? Like he's just that kind of charming and ride or die kind of friend. And so I knew, I was like, all right, she's going to be my comic relief. She is going to have incredible one liners. And interestingly enough, I have a ton of stickers at all of my signings, but every single signing, without a doubt, her two like famous quotes, the one about the Tower of Terror and the student loans,
Yes.
are the ones that always get taken. People are like, I don't even know anything about this book, but I want this sticker. So I'm very proud of the way that Shannon came out.
Well, I also love how, because when you're approached with what Margot's going, there's this like, are you serious? What's going on? But like Shannon also keeps it 100 because like one of my favorite quotes of her is, I believe you, 25%, with the other 75 leaning towards absolute bullshit, but
Shit.
alas, what's a girl to do?
Yeah, yep,
And it's just something special about being like, this is crazy. But we're
yeah,
gonna lean into it. Let's go.
yeah. And it's like that is kind of the self awareness that I think is kind of lacking sometimes in these heavy, heavy murder mystery thriller type of things. Is just like there's a line when I think they go to Hawthorne House, and she says like, "What in the Scooby Doo shit is this?"
Yes.
And it's just like that is what this is. This is a creepy old house, and you guys are being dumb enough to walk inside of it. Like, what are you doing? But it's a book and it's a thriller. Like, you have to go down there. And so like let's call out how kind of goofy this whole thing is. And so I love her dearly, and actually I have many iterations of this book, but in the original that I really fought for, I killed Shannon, and it was so sad. Um, and it was this horrific thing, and the beta reader feedback that I got, everyone was like, "You have fucked up, dude. Like, you cannot kill her." And I was like, "What am I gonna do with her?" And so it's so wild, like how one again, kind of those events sequenced come out with something incredible. So I had originally killed her. Everyone was like, you can't kill her. And then when I went to Mount Dora to actually look and check out Mount Dora before the book came out, 2 weeks before the book came out, I saw a flood, like runoff tunnel. And that inspires the ending scene with Shannon. And so I'm like, well, if I hadn't, had the feedback that I had, and I hadn't gone and looked at that thing at that exact moment, I probably wouldn't have had that idea. And to me, that is actually one of my all-time favorite scenes in that, and the anxiety of like the water and all that kind of stuff. So I am very glad she's alive, and I guess I kind of just spoiled it, but she's not dead.
No, that's okay. Because I think too, like that scene that you're talking about, because like when, when stuff starts really, I'm like, oh,
She's
she's not
toast.
me. She's for the altar, man. Like she's for the tears. And then that, like,
Hmm.
I was like, oh, Ellis is so cruel to make Margot go through this just to watch her friend die. Like,
Yes.
this is cruel and unusual punishment. And so when
Yeah.
everything turned out, I was like breath. I breathed a sigh of relief for a character that
Yes.
doesn't even exist in
I
actuality.
know. It's so funny that like they take on like real identities, and you actually do care. And I had actually hired someone to. I wanted to come out with like a special edition for like the year anniversary, and um, I knew that. And so when I first was designing the cover with the artist that I worked with, I had asked him to. I gave him a couple scenes, and I was like, "Can you do some drawings of these, and I'll put them in like the." And so here I am, never publishing a book, thinking that it'll be good enough for I'll have a collector's edition in here.
You gotta manifest
But
it.
that's exactly right. And so he wrote, excuse me, he drew the tunnel scene, and it's so soul crushing because it's from like the top of the tunnel looking down, and she's just like floating there, and you're just like, oh my god. And it like it was one of those things where I was like, if I had actually done that, I think I would be so upset with myself. So yes, I am very happy that it worked out the way that it did.
Well, and I do love the book. I'm very critical. I do judge books by their covers. I'm sorry. It is what it is.
You have
And
to.
when I saw it originally, I was like, okay, like house. Like I'm getting the vibe, like there's something wrong with this house. But then when I looked in more detail and I saw that vertical with a young woman that seemed to fall, I was like, okay, like the house that held her, is she being captive? Is this a willing fall? And then when I got to the ending, because there's some where it's like the cover is just crazy or not original. It's just
Yes.
very like repeatable. But with this one, after finished the book, I got a new appreciation for the cover, and it fit really well in my opinion.
Thank you. I really struggled because, and I do not mean this in any negative way. It works, and that's why people do it. But I see flat lay pictures all the time, and it could be the same book 11 times. It is a random, like house with big bright yellow
Yes.
text, or whatever. And I think we're starting to move away from it. I've seen some newer books coming out, that that are more unique.
Mm-hmm.
But they sell. And so like when you have a publisher who's forcing you to do that, you don't have as much control. And so when I had hired an editor who also is a really good murder mystery writer. He was like, do not go with that cover. He was like, you want to blend in, and you just want people to pick up yours as they're picking up 10 other books because you're going to sell more. And I was like, dude, I get it, but like, I want this to stand out because again, I was writing something that I wanted to read, and so I wanted to design something that I would pick up. Um, and so I was really nervous, thinking that like it looks super horror, which the book isn't necessarily, and it would be a big turnoff. But like I went to BookCon last weekend, and every single person would come up, and whether they bought the book or not, they'd be like, "This cover is super sick."
Yes.
And so it kind of reinvigorates that individuality and that uniqueness and just like what makes you you and like rock with it, you know? So thank you for
Yes.
saying that because I really struggled and I was so insecure about it for a while. But now I am really excited and the same guy has done some other art for me since, so I love his work.
Awesome. And you mentioned how, you know, the House at Helder's been released for almost a year. And with it being your debut work and having it, released to the masses, what's kind of the most unexpected feedback you've received that you kind of scratched your head and you were like, didn't see that one coming?
That's a good question. You know, I think some of the negative feedback has been really interesting. Um, you know, I saw one star the other day, and it was like, dude, this dissertation, like 19 paragraphs, and I'm just imagining this lady sitting on her cell phone, typing this whole thing out and just like picking everything apart. And like that's cool if that's your bag, like go for it. But it was like this man, I can't even think of anything, but she was like, she put her cup down over here, so how does she have it in her hand in the next chapter? And you're like, I don't know, she picked it up between chapters, man. Like, it doesn't matter. It's a book. It's not real. I hate to break it to you. So, those are kind of interesting because you're also trying to like validate yourself against them. Like, your opinion sucks. But a lot of the feedback that I have gotten that's been surprising is how many folks who don't like thriller, murder, horror, anything have enjoyed this book. So, like, my mom, for example, obviously it's my mom, so it's, skewed. But, like, my mom is too scared to watch, like, CSI. Like, she can't
Aw.
watch anything with bodies or blood or anything, right? And so she desperately was like, I really want to read this, but I'm too scared. And I was like, I'm telling you, it's not that scary. Um, and I think she's read it 3 times since, and like loved it. And I think things like the Shannon relationship and the ending with Nate and like all the different components, you do have anxiety and tension building with some of the thriller elements, but I think it's well balanced enough where any human with real emotions can like connect with it in some sort of way. And I don't necessarily think that I like set out to do that. Like let me try and create a perfect balance for non-thriller fans too. But it has just sort of turned out that way, and I'm very pleased with that.
Yeah, because I think too, it's, for a lot of people, they go to your detective series, your lawyer series, and stuff like that, which to me, those are nice at times, but especially when you're trying to get someone new into the genre, like you need to give them an original story, like an original hook. That way they know if those other series are worth their time and investment. And The House that Held Her is definitely one of those because it's not one of those that makes me scratch my head and go, why is this not in horror? Like it's
Yeah,
very true to the thriller genre.
yeah, no, thank you, because something that else that kind of like, and again, being positive and love everything from everyone, um, but designing a book around the assumption that it will be a series, I think is detrimental sometimes to the original work because
Yes.
instead of making book one like as insane as possible, you're trying to figure out how to lay things and lay the foundation for book two, right? And so you're not necessarily giving book one like everything that it might deserve. Um, and so I think probably like people have asked if I'm gonna ever like revisit this kind of like these characters and stuff. And at this point, maybe one day, but like I'm proud to say that I never envisioned anything coming after it. And I think because of that, you're able to kind of like put a nice close on it. And I think it makes the book better. And so when, to your point, when you're trying to get someone into a specific genre, and fantasy is really big on this, right? Like, oh my gosh, this series is so good. Like, you would love this so much. And I'm like, okay. And I get book one, and it's 14,000 pages. And then, and there are six books in the series. I'm like, dude, like, this is 6 years of my life. And it's a big undertaking, and it's probably well worth it, right? Um,
Hmm.
but it's a heavy task. And so to give someone something where it's a whole story wrapped up and it has all the things and 300 pages, I think is a really good kind of jumping off point for people.
Agreed. And I think with different genres, the people that are well versed in them have different expectations. Like for me, I do love a good fantasy, but even a fantasy that I liked book one, like people were like, "How did you like it?" And I was like, "Well, as a thriller horror reader, I had everything figured out by chapter five, and I was just waiting for these idiots to figure it out. And so
Yes.
hopefully in book two, things will start happening."
Yep.
But your typical fantasy lover loves those details and those long drawn out conversations and all of that context. And usually with thrillers, we're like, how do I figure out who did it? What actually
Hmm.
happened? Who can I trust? Like, it's a lot more get on with it.
Yes, it's so funny because I have a good buddy who is like jacked and like such a manly man, and he loves reading romanticises, right? And I know he's such a cool dude. And oh my gosh, I literally just lost my entire train of thought. Oh, and he's always like, dude, you have to read this book, and he'll go into the same spiel like they have the coolest magic system. It's so unique, and the history of this fantastic like cloud city is so unique and all these things, and it's like I have to learn their magic system before like I can get into anything. And in our thriller books, I'm skipping paragraphs to try and find like the next sentence to try and like move the story along. And they love the prose, right? And so it's just
Yes.
different tastes and what people love. But yeah, no, we are definitely like predisposed to action and clues and like where's the twisty stuff happening.
True. And so, speaking of twisty stuff, I am not a detail girly. I mean, I can follow along with the details, but originally creating them, not my forte. So
Hmm.
as we figure out George Hawthorne's twists and clues and games, I was just in awe. Like, this is so much. And when I'm like, oh, this must be it. We're finally done. Like, this man can't have anything left. He has more. So, like, did you have to, like, sit down with a piece of paper and, like, map out, like, well, this will lead to that, and then I can introduce this? Like, how did you come up with all of
Yes,
his stuff?
it is. It was so hard. So, I love, like I said, I love escape rooms and I love all things clues and puzzles. I grew up in Baltimore, so like the Edgar Allan Poe thing was very close to my heart, and um, that story and like the gold bug and all of those pieces, it's so like, dude, I could talk about this all day, but it's so unique because, um, okay, the guy who originally stood up the National Security Agency, NSA, right,
Mm-hmm.
was inspired and thought cryptography was cool because of the gold bug. And so, like, the whole idea of, like, the United States using cryptography to, like, win wars was all inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, right? And, like, who knew and how freaking cool. It was like the original treasure hunt. It was the Goonies, way before the Goonies was ever thought about. Um, and so that is something that's just, like, so freaking cool to me. And so I've always loved kind of like treasure hunts and like I mean I I sent my wife on a scavenger hunt for our like engagement, and so like even that like we had a lot of our relationship in New York City, and we were in Baltimore, and like I taped Clue One to like her door and texted her like, "Hey, come outside. I'm taking you on a surprise date." I was like already in New York City, like putting clues around like our favorite restaurants and stuff, just because like that's what I love. How cool to like try and figure out something that leads you somewhere else, and then you really earn like the payoff, versus just kind of having it given to you, which some people definitely would prefer. But to answer your question, yes, I actually had multiple systems to try and figure it out. Originally, I had sticky notes that I had literally put on like the entire wall of my dining room, and I would just like move them like to try and figure out the linkage, and that didn't really work. And so then I had like a giant whiteboard, and that was a little bit better. But what I eventually did was I work at AWS, Amazon Web Services, and we have like leadership principles, and one of my favorites is like working backwards. And I was like, let me apply like an LP to this, right? And so I did. I knew like, okay, this is going to be the end. So like, how does he open this? Let me do a clue here. Okay, so how is she going to know these numbers, right? And then kind of work backwards. And so then linearly, it makes a lot of sense.
So now that you mentioned that you work at AW for Amazon, I work in IT as an integrator too, and I totally agree in the working backwards because I feel like as a techie, you either are a design mind or you
Hmm.
have a troubleshooting mind. And troubleshooting is so hard to teach, but one of those first foundations I give a new hire is you need to understand this process, not just start to end, but backwards too,
Hell yeah.
because that's how you have to find the root. If you don't understand how this works, you don't understand the root cause, you don't understand the dependencies, you don't understand the implications. And I've had people say, like, well, since you work in IT and your logic mind's going all the time, that's probably why you like thrillers because
Yeah.
you're so used to problem solving. And then I was like,
Yeah.
is that true? Do I just constantly
Huh.
live in a state of trying to solve problems?
Yeah, you know what? That is a good observation, and I would wager that that is probably all of us in some form or fashion, just problem solving, who love thrillers because that is really what we're doing.
Right. Yeah. And it's really just the difference between like a plot and a bunch of data and logic. It's
Yeah,
still logic.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so funny. You're in IT too. We're a special bunch. We're all nuts.
Special is the correct term for it.
We'll be replaced in 2 years, so I'll
Yeah.
learn plumbing or something.
Well, now I have to ask because you mentioned like being replaced. There's been a lot of on Bookstagram, Book Talk, BookTube, people saying, it's written by AI. Trash.
Hmm. Yeah,
What's your take?
dude, it makes me so nervous. Um, for two reasons. One, there is no way to definitively prove unless you're asking someone to use metadata on their Word documents, or something, and try and prove some sort of receipt. Even like Pro Tools, wow, I'm thinking audio, and Procreate and like all the different things that you're using. Photoshop, you can do like a timeline, right, and speed it up. There's really not anything like that for books, and so like my biggest nightmare is being accused and having no way to prove that I didn't do it. And
Mhm.
so it's sort of like, it's sort of like how we apply a law here. Like you're innocent until someone can prove it otherwise. And it's not that. I mean, Threads cancels you immediately and that's it,
Yes.
And for me, like, I always, I was really big into grammar. I was really big into English as a student. And I loved groupings of three and comma comma and
Forget about it.
dude, I mean, and I didn't even realize it until someone the other day at BookCon was like talking about it. I was like, wait, I do that all the time. That's a sign. And they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, shit. And then excuse me, one of the surveys that I got for my new book was like, I can tell, because she also was a beta reader for The House That Held Her. She was like, you are intentionally not using M dashes because you don't want to be accused of AI, and it's ugly and it's incorrect. She was like, do not be scared to use em dashes when they're appropriate. And I'm like, I know, but like it's still, it worries me and it's so dumb. And then the other thing that makes me like nervous but sort of angry is I know without a doubt that in some of these genres, people are not cranking out 1,000+ book twice a year.
Yes.
And those people are directly competing with me,
Yes.
who is trying to get 200 words out a day, and who may have a book every other year. And so I would never like accuse anyone, and again, I wouldn't have proof, but in my opinion, at BookCon, there I'm like walking by the tables, and someone had like, I'm not kidding, 9 or 10 fantasy books. They were, this thick, and I was talking about having my book come out last year, and I'm only a year in, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I just had my year anniversary," and I'm like, "You wrote 9,000 pages, completely finished, in a year for 9 books? Like, there's no way." At least the logical brain, unless you are only doing that your entire year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's hard to, you know.
It is hard. And I think, I see two sides of this coin. I think from like a book, social media content creator, I think this is a lazy excuse where people don't have the courage to be like, I didn't like it. Because that's a
Yeah.
reflection of them. And they could be like,
Sure.
no, it's on them. They cheated. They used AI. It's not quality. But they just don't have the courage to be like, this wasn't it for me and I didn't like it because of XYZ. It takes the accountability off of them.
Yeah.
And
That's true. That is. I actually read a review the other day for a book that I was starting to read, and someone was like, "This is illogical. This is 1,000%, AI, just because it doesn't make any sense." And I was like, "Or they're just not good at planning plot. Like, why are we automatically assuming at this point?"
right. And I think too, because I know there's been a lot of discussion, because I think the next $1 billion software is going to be AI detection. There's a lot of industries that need it. And, as an integrator, I integrate with third party platforms. A lot of those SaaS applications offer an AI chatbot, an AI whatever. And as an IT personnel, I warn my clients that use it because, all of the downfalls. But especially when they're like, well, how do we tell if it's being used or not? Like, I always err on have a conversation with the person. If they can speak intelligently to the level of detail that makes sense to you, that's probably a green flag because that means that they might have used AI as an assist and not as from top to bottom.
Yo,
But
yeah.
there's but I think there's this very toxic expectation with AI where, well, we want it to do all of the things, but we don't want to monitor if it's actually doing things correctly or not. And there needs to be some kind of understanding that with great power comes great responsibility. Like, you can't just wield this and trust it, be frustrated when it doesn't work, blame it unnecessarily
Mhm.
with no evidence. I think it's really causing a problem for multiple levels in the book space.
Yeah. No, I agree. Again, coming from music, in the early or late 2000s, and autotune became like a really big thing. And for a period of like 2 or 3 years, you would go into Hot Topic and there would be a sticker that says autotune free, or there would be no sticker. And the assumption was they used autotune, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was sort of like how we are envisioning AI right now. It was cheating, right? But now it's like, well, I mean, like it's more pleasing to the ear, and it's not necessarily like I'm saving an entire performance, but maybe I'm raising up a note half a step, and so it's not like what it used to be. But I kind of compare it to that, where eventually, some way, I would love for industry to figure out how to mark something as AI generated. But then the problem is, right? You don't want your work in one of these tools, and
Mm-hmm.
so someone goes, "Oh, they definitely used AI because I fed it into this AI recognizer and it said 91% probable. And I'm like, you just took their work and you put it into a data lake that they're going to use.
Well,
Um,
and those aren't even accurate half the time. If you
yeah.
put a paragraph into a book that was published way before, because they were using all of these source materials to train AI, no matter what flavor it is,
Yes.
Grok, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. Like,
Yep. Yep.
all of these old materials are flagged as 100% AI because that's what they learned off of. It's not
Absolutely.
reliable.
Absolutely. And I think the problem is, and again, like being in IT, I think where we understand, but a lot of the common space and non-technical folks have no idea what AI actually is and how it actually works. And so, they think a lot of things that just aren't true. Um, and, it can't think for itself in a creative way, but it certainly can be logical. And so, there are some people who are like, oh, I use it for an outline, but then I write all my own things. And I don't do that, but like, it makes sense. I couldn't fault someone for being like, I can't get my dates straight. So, like, I'm just going to ask this thing to make sure my dates are straight or whatever. Um, and I wouldn't like cancel someone for that. But there are a lot of people who would, and so it's either like, we just got an email the other day from the Authors Guild, and it was like they had come out with I don't remember exactly what they call it, certificate or something like that. And it basically is just that you've pledged that this book is AI free, and so you can go on and look up an ISBN or a title on
Hmm.
this website, right? Um, and the theory is that you get kicked out, and if someone was able to prove it or not. But like again, what just stops someone from using an AI tool and then saying I didn't use an AI tool? Because it's just a trust system where they're promising. It sucks because it really is going to disrupt everything, especially in the creative space. I read an article today and I was like, fuck yeah, like this is totally, I can see this happening, where it was like imperfect writing is going to become it. Because everything is going to be so overly perfect and polished that it's going to be exhausting to read. So things with personality, with imperfections, with not a perfect flowing prose, those are the books that are going to attract attention. And I hope, and I desperately hope that that is the case. Because I agree, it's going to be impossible. I like, even now I've hired two developmental editors and a line editor for the book. And I have no idea if they just took my manuscript, threw it in Chat GPT, and was like, tell me things that could improve this book, and then they put it in a Word file, right? Like, I just have to trust that they're doing what they said they would do and they're taking all
Hmm.
my money to do it. But there's no way to prove it. And I don't know how to do that because everyone will always say, well, I don't want you to feed it into a tool. Okay, that makes total sense. I don't want that either. Like, then how do you prove it? It sucks.
Well, in news that does not suck, and non AI writing, you dropped a huge bombshell before joining the pod, and
I
I
did.
screamed so loud. So tell us, what is in the future of Ellis Hart non AI writing?
Yeah. So I have been working on my second full length novel forever. And I think it's finally done. And I will be releasing it in September of this year. It's called Make Me Forget Again. And I am terrified that people are going to hate it. But again, I was like, I'm writing something that I want to read and tackling something that I think needs to be tackled. And so I'm going out on a limb and just hoping that I kind of get it right. Maybe find a curve that's going up in a trend instead of trying to find a trend that's headed down. But yeah.
Well, I saw in your blurb, um, Make Me Forget Again explores how grief can transform an ordinary person into the very monster they seek to destroy. And that line alone, I'm in because I think for me, as someone who's experienced loss, as we all do, grief is an extremely powerful emotion. And I'm thankful for it in some ways because it has made me realize things that I'm willing to accept and I am no longer willing to accept
Yeah.
because of that moment of loss making you realize how important life is. So I had to ask, since we were talking tonight anyways, you know, how did grief come to be the topic of conversation for that book?
So, there's plenty of grief and historical pain in the house that held her, right? I mean, that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of Margot's thing. Um, and I think it's important to kind of like write things that connect with you so that you can be authentic. And so, for example, my wife and I have three boys. We really want a girl. We've talked about adopting for forever. The system's broken. It's expensive. Takes forever. We try and get pregnant with our girl. We have a boy, right? And so it's like, it's kind of like funny now, but at the time, I was like, man, CPS in this whole system makes me so furious. And there are so many things wrong, and there's so much underfunding and inexperience and not enough attention. And so, it made me want to write about the grief that causes. And so with Make Me Forget Again, I had in the back of my mind. So when I was writing The House That Held Her, I was like, I kind of had like some specific lines that I was like, oh, I need to write around this. One of them was the darkness line that's in the chest, and then the other one was if someone stops existing, or no, if someone doesn't have a purpose, they basically stop existing.
Yeah.
And I wrote the books kind of around that. And so going into Make Me Forget Again, my kind of theme was, is there ever peace after vengeance? And that was kind of like my tagline. What is the cost of keeping the dead quiet is, the one for The House That Held Her. But, and it was like, I went against everyone's recommendations again with this because it's about two men, and everyone was like, women are not going to like this. You need to write a female character. You need to do this, this, and this. And what's crazy for me is I wrote The House That Held Her, and then after it was out, I was doing a signing, and someone was like, it was so brave of you to write from a female perspective. Like, what made you? And I was like, oh shit. Like, that never even like occurred to me that like, did I do a good job representing like women? And I mean, there were plenty of times where I like asked my wife, like, would you feel this way if you had this news or whatever? And she read it, and I had a bunch of I think all of my beta readers are female. Anyway, I I was like, oh my gosh, like it didn't even occur to me. And so, kind of one of the things that I wanted to do with Make Me Forget Again was write from a male perspective, and kind of talk about immense pain that you can experience as a man and a protector and a provider. And if you come up short, and something happens to someone that you love, how do you fix yourself? Is there fixing yourself? And so in the book, I mean, like, if the trigger warnings for The House That Held Her are big, the trigger warnings for Make Me Forget Again are probably double. Just because, like, I want it to be very, very real. And so there's lots of potential suicide things. There's lots of abuse. There's, all kinds of different elements, because that is me being authentic. Those are the things that actually happen to people, and they have to figure out how to exist with it. And so I'm really, really proud of the way that it came out. I rewrote it probably 4 or 5 times, and it got to the point where Do you know Carter Wilson? He wrote "Tell Me What You Did."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, love him, and he was one of the people who did my developmental edits for me, and he came back. I was like, I cracked it, I did it, and he came back and he was like, I don't think this is it, man. And I was like, what? And he specifically said like, sometimes there are books that we release, and then sometimes there are books that just teach us lessons, and we learn from them and then move on. And I was like, fuck, I've been working on this book for a year. And I was so depressed. I was sitting in this office like, I think I'm gonna write one book and that'll be it. And then I sat with it for probably about a week, and then one day I just had this idea, and I was like, but what if? And I rebuilt the entire back half of the book, and it hits so hard, and like I literally could cry right now just thinking about it. So my worry is that the house that held her is very um, spooky, potential supernatural, and so it's built around Gothic mansion, and is it haunted? Is she crazy, or is she being gaslit? Right, and it's like a perfect combination. And so there are scary elements. The Penny Lark scene is like horrifying. The flashback for George is horrifying. And so I wanted to also kind of pull out emotions, but not necessarily rely on like scary stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so Make Me Forget Again, I would say, is like a high octane, like straight up thriller. And it is heartfelt, and it will yank all of your emotions all over the place. But there isn't going to be like ghosts. There isn't going to be like some terrible, scary creature off waiting in the woods. But I hope that people who say they like thrillers will actually like this and not just expect like something scary, supernatural scary. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think as long as you set the expectation, there was another book that I did not enjoy. It was a thriller, and I just flat out said in my review like, I think the expectation set in the blurb needs to be reworked, because if the
Mm,
stakes weren't so high and you deliver like medium,
yeah,
I'm gonna, but like if you set the expectations right, like this is what you're going to get, well, like I think that goes a long way with the readers too, because then they know like this isn't going to be exactly like The House That Held Her. This is a new book. These are new characters. It's everything new. And so that way they go in with their eyes open and like aware of what's actually, you know,
yeah.
what the
No,
differences are.
I agree. I think we even went with like the cover. It's the exact opposite of the house. So like the colors are yellow and blue, and I had this idea of like one of the characters, what he experiences is like a mental breakdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of like cabin fever, and is just distraught. And like one of my favorite, oh my gosh, one of my favorite lines that starts a chapter is, "I wasn't awake when they buried my wife," and it's like heart wrenching because he's in the hospital recovering and his wife has died, and it's like it is so fucking sad. And so what's cool is that he is just like scribbling all over the walls. He's kind of just going all over the place. And so what we did was it's like the cover, and then it's like torn in half, and behind it is the notepad that he's like scribbling stuff on. And so it's so sick. I'm like so happy with the cover. And even that again, I think it has a very different look, and a different feel. And then yeah, I hope with like the I can actually, hold on, what I could probably do is pull up the real blurb, and I can read it to you as a exclusive here. So okay, this is what I have right now. When the lives of two strangers are shattered by staggering loss, both embark on paths of revenge. As they each grow closer to their goal of avenging their lost loved ones, they find themselves hurtling toward one another in a final confrontation that only one will survive. And so what's cool is like throughout the whole book you're like, how do they know each other, like what's going on. I love both of these characters, and I just wanted it to. The house that held her ends very clean, right? And whether you liked the ending or not, because lots of people hate the ending because they're like, it's too clean, um, but or like too frilly, unrealistic. This one is as real as possible and does not necessarily end in what you would expect to be like the happy ending, but I think it's like the real authentic real authentic ending of the story of these two men. And anyway, I could go on forever, but I'm so proud of it. I love it so very much.
As soon as you dropped that and I saw it on Instagram, I grabbed my planner. I was like, well, if he joins, he won't see me because I had to go in my other room and get my planner, and I put it in September, whatever
I
the date
love
is,
it.
like at the top of the month. Like, keep an eye out on the date because it sounds phenomenal. And what I can do is I can actually update the description after this goes live. Like, if you have pre-order specific areas too that you want to push, like I can update the description, and
Yeah,
that way
yeah.
people later on see it. Definitely get some excitement around it because it sounds great. I'm really excited for it.
Thank you. I hope that it will be good. I had Carter Wilson did blurb it for me, which is awesome. He gave me such a good blurb. And then
Oh,
I don't know if you know Heather Gudenkoff. She did
yes.
Overnight Guest. Love her. She was at Creepy Retreat, and she is like the coolest woman. And she's currently reading it and offered to blurb if she likes it. Um, so having two, New York Times bestsellers blurbing my book because I'm a no one is just insane to me. But what's I've learned is that the writing community is just so gracious and humble, and I could not ask for like more supportive people. So anyway, I will definitely have some information out. I think I have to kind of finalize. It's always hard. Again, you have to work backwards because you need this much time with like printers, and you need this much time to upload, and you have to get all the ISBNs configured and all that stuff. So it's hard by yourself to do it as an indie, but I think it's half the fun. And I think one of my really exciting where I get to be very creative is I don't know if you ever saw, but last year when the book came out, I did 50 PR kits to just like random Bookstagram people, friends that I had made or whatever. And I was able to be really creative. So like there was like a Margot CPS badge on like a lanyard. There was like a blueprint of the house that included all of the house. There was I put a copy of the Gold Bug in it. Just so many like fun little things. And so this PR kit I've been planning forever, and I'm so excited. Literally, there is a Datsun like old kind of car that is fixed up, and it's a very specific model. And I found that like in 2009, Hot Wheels did like this exact car,
Oh my god.
and so I went on eBay and paid an exorbitant amount of money for a bunch of these Hot Wheels cars because I want to put them in the box because like why wouldn't you want to have Logan's car in like a Hot Wheel? So I think just that kind of stuff. I love the opportunity to be like super creative and do that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm very excited.
That's awesome. I've just recently returned to Bookstagram, so I missed that when it first came out.
Okay.
I took a break, kind of like how you talked about where life gets crazy and you take a break.
Yeah.
So I'm back, which is why I hadn't heard about your book until Susie introduced me to it and read it. So I can only imagine though with how much care and precision you put in your book, and now hearing what you did in the previous PR box, like I know Bookstagram's just gonna lose it when they start getting theirs.
I hope so. It's like I wasn't sure what to do, and I read an interview from Geneva Rose about she wrote The Perfect Divorce during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was kind of upside down. And so she was like, I just sent some books to people who had between 500 and 1,000 followers because they would still be humble enough to actually read it. but still have like a big enough audience. And so that's why I mean, that was what I did with The House That Held Her, but also in my announcement today, I'm really not interested in someone just because they have like 50,000 followers. I'm really interested in someone who's actually going to read it and connect with like the characters. So even if they have like 30 followers, I'm interested in it just because I want people to experience the book. And yeah, so I'm just that authenticity is important to me. So the PR kits will be cool and they'll go all over the place and it should be a fun release.
Awesome. Well, I'll link to that post too. So if I have any bookstagrammers or book content creators that are listening and they're like, "What post? I missed it." I'll link it in the description too. I'll also link all of Ellis's socials. That way you can stay up to date on all the new exciting things coming out. But Ellis, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And now with like the more context behind the house that held her, it has so much heart, and you can tell in the pages. But then just hearing it through your point of view as well, yeah, it's a special book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. It's weird that people even want to hear me talk about anything, let alone a book that I wrote. I genuinely appreciate the opportunity and thank you for being so supportive and kind because it doesn't feel like I'm a real author. And then you have like people say nice things and you're like, I don't know, this is pretty cool. So thank you. I appreciate the support.
Yeah, of course. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Bye.